There is quite a bit of discussion about what teams, drivers, NASCAR should do in order to kind of get a handle on a lot of, I guess, reckless driving that we've been seeing. I don't even think it's really racing at all, especially when you look at something like Sammy Smith did, where he's just dive bombing the corner, running right into Taylor Gray, not trying to actually race him, purposely spinning him out and trying to win the race that way. Obviously, it's something we saw last year in the Cup Series as well with Austin Dillon. I think it was at Richmond, where he basically turned himself into a pinball and was going around hitting everyone in his path in order to get to the win. And so obviously, that is a problem. It is a huge problem. It's something I feel like is brought up every other week, every 2 weeks, etc. There's something like this happening. People are talking about. And I think there's a difference between kind of the tough racing that we see with maybe Carson Hocevar or Ross Chastain and just dive bombing someone like we saw with Sammy Smith, or intentionally wrecking people like we saw with Austin Dillon last year. I think there is a clear difference between those two types of actions that we're seeing. I think Hocevar really wasn't trying to intentionally wreck anyone, was just racing really hard. And obviously, there's a difference between a bump and run and what Sammy Smith did, right? And I think that NASCAR, just like we, can see that there is a difference and they need to step in. However, that is not what Brad Keselowski thinks should happen. This is what he said a couple days ago over on X. He says, "I've been really quiet on this over the last few days, but it's clear this is important to fix, and also clear that it's bigger than one race weekend. My 2 cents, the solution needs to come from the car owners, not NASCAR. Until the car owners are willing to park their drivers for getting this out of control, very little will change. I get that they are all scared to park a funded driver out of fear they will lose the money to continue to operate. However, at some point, that's the risk you have to take to get this right. I believe if all of the teams do it together, it would work. I think this is an utterly ridiculous idea. I refereed soccer for over a decade, almost 2 decades, over half my life. I refereed some extraordinarily competitive travel soccer games, especially in the Washington, D.C. metro area. And the idea that a coach is going to bench his star player because he committed a foul against the other team is ridiculous, because that is what Brad Keselowski is suggesting. No, you have the referee, you have the official there for a reason. The official is trained, and they're the ones who are supposed to enforce the laws or rules of the game or sport that they're playing. It is the official's job to punish that star player if he commits a foul against the other team. And obviously, in soccer, there are various levels of punishment. Obviously, you just have a standard foul, and you usually get a free kick. If it is a more egregious foul, there is a yellow card that the referee can use. And then if it is an absolutely terrible foul, you have a red card and you can eject the guy from the game. And NASCAR has similar options in its rule book as well that they should be using. They have the black flag. We've seen that they can park people for multiple laps like they did with Lane Riggs in the Truck Series. We've seen that they can do retroactive penalties too, right? Obviously they fined Sammy Smith 50 driver points and $25,000. They can also make you sit out and suspend people. So they have options to do that. So this idea that the team owners should somehow be sitting their drivers is ridiculous. And Chris Gabehart called Brad out here and basically made the same point that I just made. And he says, "I have immense respect for Keselowski, but I just don't get this. In what other sport does the team penalize a player for a flagrant foul? Answer, no other sport. This is simply a flagrant foul. The refs have to be willing to blow the whistle, even if they get a call wrong every now and then. That over some time is when it will stop." And I think that is the big problem. NASCAR is wildly inconsistent when it comes to these rulings. So I think drivers and teams have no clue what NASCAR is going to do. And if you listen to Denny Hamlin, it seems like NASCAR makes a lot of decisions by the way the wind is blowing in social media. And I'm becoming increasingly convinced of that. In fact, we have this podcast that Jeb Burton does with Ward Burton called Trouble at Martinsville and Throwback Paint. It's called Crossroads Podcast. And they did an episode Tuesday, earlier this week, discussing what happened. Now, obviously, Jeb was fined $5,000 for an interaction he had with Daniel Dye at the Infield Care Center. He has apologized for that, covered that in the previous video. But he talks about here about a conversation he had with NASCAR officials on what can he do to try to curb this, or is there anything that NASCAR is going to do? And he basically says he has no clue, because if he does something, NASCAR is likely going to punish him for retaliating. So let's take a listen to what he has to say right here.
Problem with the whole world, not just racing. There's no consequence for somebody doing something stupid. We don't do anything about it anymore. The sanctioned body doesn't do nothing. I had a conversation yesterday with someone at NASCAR. You're going to fine me if I break his jaw. You're going to fine me if I destroy my race car after the race and destroy his. You're not going to do anything about it. So what are you supposed to do? Wait in the parking lot and beat his ass? Because something has to be done. So I was very frustrated with everyone racing the other night, but that took me over the edge because of all of it compounding. So I don't think the kid really I think if he could go back, he probably wouldn't have done it again.
So you can see there what he is saying, right? He says he's having this conversation with NASCAR officials, and or at least one NASCAR official, and he's trying to figure out, like, well, what is the line? What can or can I do? Like you guys talk about, like, you got to let the boys handle things, and then, like, sometimes the boys are trying to handle things, and you're dropping fines on them, or you're penalizing them when they're trying to handle things. So I think there is just a lot of inconsistency coming from NASCAR. They don't seem to have someone that is, again, I'm using the word again, consistent with their decisions. The decisions seem to be changing by whatever the social media consensus happens to be, rather than having a set of rules laid out that they follow. And I think that is the biggest problem, is they don't seem to have officials, race directors, whatever, that are on the same page and are going to be able to make these calls. I mean, I think I remember, I forget who it was. I think it was Elton Sawyer. He was talking about how he literally had to have a meeting with his two race directors to get them on the same page after what happened with Daytona. So they clearly they weren't on the same page of what needed to happen. And those rules weren't laid out. I mean, this is a sport that has been around for decades. The rules should be pretty clear by now on what you can or can't do. Now, obviously, we see how sports do evolve. They do add rules. They do maybe remove rules and things like that. But those are usually minor things that happen. I mean, people still, for the most part, know that where the out of bounds lines are. They still know, for the most part, what a flagrant foul is. But in NASCAR, it just doesn't seem to be the case in many points. I know people point out what Joey Logano did. I think it was to William Byron at Darlington a couple of years ago, where he ran into the rear of Byron purposely. He didn't wreck him. Byron was able to keep going, but he clearly just ran right into the back of him, like Russ Wheeler in Days of Thunder, and drove around him. And there was no penalty. There were no consequences for that. And then you have this here with Sammy Smith, where he's runs right into Taylor Gray. Obviously, he does spin him out, and he's getting a 50-point driver fine, and or a 50-point driver fine, and then a $25,000 monetary fine. So where's the consistency? And I think that's really, it sounds like, what a lot of people are looking for. Now, Brad is obviously trying to have team owners get in, which I just think is ridiculous. I think NASCAR officials need to step in. I think they need to just make it really clear what the rules are and stick to it, and have someone that can come in and say this is unacceptable. I feel like I've listened to multiple interviews from NASCAR veterans, especially Mark Martin, where they talk, I don't remember what the guy's name is, but they knew you cannot do this. I think Kevin Harvick says it too. Like, this guy sat me down, said, you will not do this anymore. And this is not how you will behave. So obviously you would have some guys would try to push the boundaries a little bit, but there was the guy at NASCAR who was like, no, this is not acceptable. And I just don't feel like we have that right now in modern day NASCAR. And I think it's to the detriment of the sport, really. I do think the lack of consistency in the officiating, and then you just kind of getting like racing like we get at Martinsville. And it seems to happen obviously a lot more in the Xfinity series, but it's not entertaining, and it just ends up becoming a giant wreck fest. And you might as well just go to your local county fair and watch a bunch of junkers crash into each other in a demolition derby, because they're not racing. They're not racing anymore. And you go to NASCAR events to see racing, or at least that's what I go to a NASCAR event, is to see racing. Now, obviously, I do appreciate the drama and everything like that. But you still want to see them race. I want to see great bump and run moves. I want to see slight touches on the bumper, getting the guy out of the groove just a little bit, like make it a piece, like an artwork. I always loved to watch Philip Morris when he came to Dominion Raceway, because the guy made passing on a short track like a work of art. It was beautiful to watch. He was so good at it, and you just love just watching him at work. And I think that's what we want to see when we see these guys in the Cup Series, in the Xfinity Series. We don't want to see them playing bumper cars. And I think it really comes down to the sanctioning body to be consistent with their rules. So I know this has gone on a little bit, but let me know what you guys make of this. What do you make of what Brad Keselowski suggested here? What do you make about what Chris Gabehart said? And let me know what you thought about Jeb Burton's discussion there as well. Let me know in the comments below.